What most people do, and I have worked with hundreds of thousands of people around the world, what most people do, they postpone being great. They postpone taking risks. They postpone being a great leader. They postpone working on their thinking. They postpone innovating. They postpone building their business. They postpone being great with their family. They postpone developing their courage until sometime in the future when they say, that's the ideal time. But if you live like that, you're just lying to yourself. Because there will never be a better time than today to be the leader and the person you've always wanted to be. In China, they say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. The second best time is today. And what I've realized is, or let me ask you a question. What if the things you now believe are the most important things in life, you actually discover are the least important things when you get to the end? And what if the things you now believe are the least important things, what if the things you now believe are the least important things? Like working on your mind, like being brave, like being ethical, like being passionate, like doing your work like Picasso painted and like Pushkin wrote. What if the things that you now believe are the least important things, you get to the end of your life and you realize they were the most important things? George Bernard Shaw was asked on his deathbed, what would you do if you could live your life over again? You know what he replied? He said, I'd like to be the person I could have been but never was. Your most important commodity is not just energy, it's time. And human nature is such that we all wish we had more time. And yet we waste the time we have being busy, being busy. And so few of us focus on what's truly important. Because we're so caught up in distractions and busyness and so many choices. The problem is the days do slip into weeks, the weeks slip into months, the months slip into years, and before you know it, you will be at the end of your life. There's a story, it comes from France, and there was a little boy who never focused on what was most important. He always was living for some time in the future. His name was Peter. When he was in school, he'd wanted to be on vacation. When he was on vacation, he wanted to be doing something else. One day, this little boy went for a walk in the woods that he used to love to walk in. And he saw a patch of grass, and he went to sleep on the grass. And while he was sleeping, he heard his name being called. Someone said, Peter, Peter, Peter. So he opened his eyes, and he couldn't believe it. There was a 100-year-old woman with snow white hair. And in her hand, she held a ball. And in the ball, there was a little hole out of which dangled a piece of thread. And she said, Peter, this thread is the thread of your life. This is a magic ball. If you pull on this ball a little bit, days will go by in minutes. If you pull on it a bit more, years will go by in seconds. Would you like this ball? Well, he said, this is fantastic. He said, I want to move through my life quickly. So he took the ball. Next thing he knew, he's in class, but he doesn't want to be in class. He had never learned to focus on what was most important. He was always thinking about the future. So he pulled out the ball and he pulled on the thread. And the next thing he knew, he was on summer vacation. He said, this is great, but I don't want to be a child anymore. I want to be a teenager. So he pulled on the thread even more. And the next thing he knew, he was a teenager with a pretty young girlfriend named Elise. Well, he said, this is great, but I don't want to be a teenager anymore. I'm in a hurry to go through life. I just want to be busy. So he pulled on the thread a bit more, and the next thing he knew, he was an adult. But he also noticed that once he was an adult, his once young mother was growing old. And he also noticed that his once jet black hair was starting to turn gray. But he could never appreciate what was most important in life, so he pulled on that thread again. And the next thing he knew, he was an old man. And his wife, Elise, had passed away many years earlier. And for the first time in his life, Peter recognized that he had focused on what was not important in life. And he felt very sad. And he went to walk in the woods that he used to love to walk in as a little boy, and he went to sleep. And while he was sleeping, he heard his name being called. Peter! Peter! And he opened his eyes and he couldn't believe it. It was the 100-year-old woman with snow white hair. And she looked at him and she said, Peter, have you enjoyed the gift that I have given to you? And he said, well, at first it was wonderful. I could move through life so quickly, being busy. But he said, now that I'm old and I understand what life is all about, I've realized I've missed out on what was most important. But by now, it's too late. And she looked at him and she said, Peter, you're a very ungrateful man. She said, I gave you such a special gift, but you've wasted it. She said, but I'm going to give you another gift. I'm going to give you the chance to live your life over again. And he went to sleep, and he heard his name being called another time. Peter! Peter! And he opened up his eyes, and he couldn't believe it. It was his mother. And she was young, and she was vital, and she was laughing. And she said, Peter, you little boy, you sleep too much. Get up and go to school. And he realized it was a dream that he had, and he went out to school, and he had the best day that he'd ever had. And the point of the story is simply this. Most of us don't discover what's most important until it's too late. Don't let that happen to you. Don't let that happen to you. Which brings me to the fourth point, guts. You have to have courage. You have to have guts. The only failure in business is the failure to try. The only failure in business is the failure to try. Success is a numbers game. So the harder you work, the luckier you get. The more times you ask, the more times you try to seize an opportunity, the more successful you will become. So make sure you have courage. Make sure you run towards your fears rather than running away from your fears. Because the fears you do not climb become your walls. And then finally, here in this room today, make a commitment to be excellent. Make a commitment to be excellent in 4 areas. I call this the quadrinity of leadership. 4 areas. Number 1, be excellent in your thinking. Be excellent in your thinking. Be excellent in your thinking. I'm going to say this again because it's so important. Be excellent in your thinking. You cannot afford even one negative thought in your mind. Because even one negative thought, that I will fail, or I can't succeed, or what if this doesn't work, or what if they say no? Even one negative thought is like a germ. And as you think one negative thought, you are already in the process of growing other negative thoughts in your mind. And pretty soon, your mind will be full of those germs and your mind will be sick. Does that make sense? You cannot afford even one negative thought. If you look at a champion athlete before the big game, they have trained their mind to be so focused on their opportunities, so positive, so excellent in their thinking, they don't even think one negative thought. The second thing to be excellent in, your feelings. Your feelings. Your feelings. Be excellent in your feelings. So be passionate, be happy, be positive, be grateful. Gratitude and fear cannot live in the same room. Number 3, be excellent with your words. It is amazing to me how many people say things like this. They will say, oh, I hate to do that. Don't use that word. How many people, I'm sure they say this in Russia, they say, wow, did you see his suit? Or did you see that beautiful car? I would die to have that car. Do they say that here in Russia? Right? I would die to have his life. I would die to be him. I would die to look like her. Don't say it if you don't want it to happen. Words are powerful, but most people don't think about their words. When you talk to your team, be careful of every word you use. Do you use the language of leadership? Do you use words that inspire people? Look at what the great leaders did by the power of their words. Look at what Nelson Mandela did by his words. Look at what Dostoevsky did with his words. Look at what Mahatma Gandhi did with his words. Words are powerful. Words can influence people. So when you build your team, as you build a great team, as you build a great network, make sure, number 3, you're excellent with your words. With your words. I remember I was in a hotel a little while ago. I spent a lot of my life in hotels. So I was going to go out to dinner. I called the concierge. I said, can I have how many people love good food by a show of hands? Fantastic. How many people like good wine by a show of hands? I remember one person once saying to me, said, life is too short for bad wine. So enjoy life as you go through life. Someone else once said to me, children and wine tell the truth. Children and wine tell the truth. So I was at this hotel and I spoke to the concierge and I said, I want to have a reservation at this restaurant. Can you get me a reservation at the restaurant? She calls me back at 5 minutes later. I pick up the phone. She says, Mr. Sharma? I said, yes. She says, I've got some very bad news. No, I honestly, I wondered, I said, who died? And she said, I couldn't get your reservation. Think about your words. Your words, the words you use with your team, the words you use with your customers influence them. And the words you use with yourself determines the way you feel. This is really important. Okay? This might not be the most interesting thing I'm going to share with you today. This might be one of the most important things I share with you today. The way you talk to yourself determines how excellently you play. And most people say really negative things to themselves. If you look at any champion in business or in sports, they talk to themselves in a way that supports them. So number 1, be excellent with your thinking, be excellent with your feelings, be excellent with your words, and number 4, be excellent with your actions. Be excellent with your actions. What does that mean? It means live each day doing actions that will live longer than you will. Live each day doing actions that will live longer than you will. Does that make sense? Live each day doing things, doing deeds that when you're dead, people will say, there was a hero, there was a leader, there was a great human being. Joseph Campbell, the philosopher, once said, to live in the hearts of those we leave behind is not to die. So the fourth thing to be excellent in is your behavior. When I wrote The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, I came across the story of an Indian Maharaja. And every morning this Maharaja did something you might find very strange. Every morning this Maharaja celebrated his own funeral. And all the while he was chanting, I have lived fully, I have lived fully, I have lived fully. Now, I couldn't understand why this man would get up every day and celebrate his own funeral every morning. Every morning he would celebrate his own funeral. So I asked my father, I said, Dad, why would this king get up every morning and celebrate his own funeral? And my dad said, Robin, this man has developed a morning practice to remind him that every day could be his last. Steve Jobs said, if you live each day as if it was your last, one day you'll be right. He also said, Steve Jobs also said, he said, every one of us wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die to get there. Right? And the point I'm trying to make is, you are from Russia, or from Israel, or from Moldavia, or from Kazakhstan, or from Canada, or from Spain. But we all have one thing in common. A day will come when every single one of us in this room will die. What we don't know is when that day will be. And what I'm suggesting to you is that today you fast forward to the end of your life and you reflect on what's most important in terms of being a great leader, building a great business, being a great human being. And today onward, you act and do deeds in such a way that when you are no longer here, your life will continue after you.